Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, reviewing recruiting classes across the country. Is about 80% of the blue chip top 300 to 1,000 players. The guys that get signed in the Power Five have signed on the dotted line during this early signing period. We go to the Big 12, Iowa State. We got Levi Stevenson on the line from wide right, Natty Light. Levi, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all.
So let's talk about this recruiting class. So Iowa State is quickly becoming the fill in the blank, maybe the Kansas State of 10 years ago, or the Michigan State of 5 years ago, or the current Wisconsin, where forget the recruiting rankings, forget them bringing in a top 45 class. They're going to turn it into a top 15 team. And right now, sixth ranking, according to the 247 composite in the Big 12, number 43 in the country, number 46 last year. Again, this team could be seriously competing for the Big 12 in the next few years, and the recruiting rankings would belie that level of development. So your thoughts about the recruiting class and who you like?
So I actually really like this recruiting class. Is that what they did? It's kind of a weirdly balanced one. They didn't take a single running back. They didn't take a tight end because both of those rooms are very, very full right now. But interestingly enough, for the second time in 3 years, they've taken two quarterbacks, and actually both of them are lefties. Weirdly enough, I really like it. There's some good balance here. There's some holes that they did a nice job of filling, and they've got some good playmakers, especially from in the state of Iowa. Kind of the headliner of the class is Hunter Deckers. He's a quarterback from a really small town out in western Iowa that kind of really burst onto the scene last summer, basically, or actually was kind of this past summer when he started camping a little bit more. He's a dual threat quarterback. I think he's like maybe seventh in the country as a dual threat quarterback. Well, everybody's got him as a 4-star. I think they've got him as the 12th best quarterback in the country. That's a good prep move because Brock Purdy's only got 2 years left. So by the time he comes around, you still have Riel Mitchell, but then now you have Hunter Deckers, and then actually the second quarterback in this class, which is Aiden Bowman, son of former NFL quarterback Todd Bowman, out of Buffalo, Minnesota. Another lefty. He's more of your prototypical pro style quarterback, 6'6", 215, kind of he's not a statue in the pocket, but he's good pocket quarterback, smart kid, coach's kid. Pretty much he's your prototypical classic pro style quarterback. The next one, the next big name out of the class is Cole Peterson. He's an outside linebacker out of another in-state kid. He's out of Central Decatur in Leon, Iowa. 4-star kid, really athletic, very much in the mold of Mike Rhodes. A little bit undersized coming out of high school, but he's a 6'4" linebacker, which is taller for a linebacker. He's an outside. I would say it's got a lot of talent in the middle, so it makes sense for them to go for the outside stuff. He's a big get, and there's a lot of people that think he's got one of those. He's underrated because he shut down his recruitment early. He's out of Western Iowa, so a lot of scouting services haven't had a ton of looks at him. He hasn't camped very much, so there's a general feeling that he's very, very underrated in this class. On the offensive line, you got a couple really nice players: Sam Rangert, Hayden Pauls, and Jake Remsburg. Brady Peterson. Jake Remsburg was last year. Brady Peterson, he's out of Ankeny. There's a definite feeling that he's another one that's a kind of a diamond in the rough. He shut down his recruitment very, very early because he's from Ankeny, which is about 20 minutes away from Ames. And he actually grew up an Iowa State fan too. So as soon as he got the offer, he committed, and that was about it. But I know Michigan and a few other schools and I think maybe Notre Dame as well kind of started sniffing around a little bit the last 6 months or so, but he had shut his recruitment down. So I would say didn't really have to fight them for him or anything like that. But when you have schools like that come offering for your players, that's a good offer list to have. So you can tell that other people have noticed, even out there in Central Iowa, and people don't always find those types of players because the state of Iowa doesn't produce a ton of super high level top tier blue chip talent. But a couple positions they do almost always punch above their weight classes on the line and at linebacker. You can almost always find good Division I Power 5 offensive linemen in Iowa, and you can find good linebackers. They're not always going to be recruited high, but you can find them, and especially if you can develop them, there's usually enough talent there where they can punch well above their weight class. You got a couple of 3 safeties actually, because you're losing Braxton Lewis after this year, and Greg Eisworth only has 1 year left, and Braxton Lewis has 1 year left. So you're going to have a lot of turnover at the safety position over the next couple of years. So they picked up 3 of them. Two out of San Antonio, Jordan Morgan and Mason Chambers. And then you have Craig McDonald also out of Minnesota. out of the Twin Cities. All three are very talented guys, and they're all going to be here for spring ball. So there's a good chance you're probably going to see them for 20. You could see them in a starting role even in 2020. Three very, very talented guys. You got a few on the offensive side of the ball. You've got a few wide receivers that are very, very talented. They all fill different roles. Daniel Jackson is a 4-star, high 3-star, low 4-star guy. He was hurt most of his senior year, but he's a like 6'3", good route runner, nice hands kind of guy. He's the type of receiver that a lot of teams seem to be looking for right now, is the 6'2", 6'3" guy that can run good routes. Sort of like like an Amari Cooper or there's a few Stephon Diggs, things like, I guess Stephon Diggs is not quite that tall, but that kind of guy, the route runners that are a little bit taller that can still catch stuff over the top. You got Xavier Hutchinson. He's another 6'3" guy that he is one of the best JUCO receivers in the country. He had a lot of interest from from a lot of Power 5 schools. He's one of the most coveted receivers coming out of JUCO, and they think he's going to be able to contribute right away. Matt Campbell actually in his press conference said he had some of the most impressive tape he's ever seen from a receiver recruit. So we'll see. He's seen some good tape before, so I have a feeling that Xavier's probably going to be a nice player, and you should see him quite a bit next year. Another guy that's actually really interesting too is TJ Tampa. He's from Florida. It's a great name, especially because he's from Florida. But an interesting thing there too is he's a basketball dual sport guy. He's a really, really good basketball player, 6'2", 6'3". What was interesting is that Georgia actually came after him really hard the last week or so. He had committed to Iowa State for a while. He didn't sign on the first early signing day because he was still, he had gotten a Georgia offer late the previous week, and ended up obviously he signed with Iowa State. But that's another one you can tell because of his offer list and who's been looking at him, that the ratings may not have caught what is a really nice athlete, which is interesting because now you have Iowa State. This early signing day is kind of interesting too, because if Georgia was coming at him at the second signing day late, you say, well, Georgia's trying to pick up a receiver, and that's what it is. So it's not really like Iowa State didn't really beat out Georgia for a recruit or anything like that. But this is the early signing day. Georgia still has another month and a half to go after a receiver. So, in this case, Iowa State very much did beat out Georgia for a receiver, which is, Iowa State beating out Georgia for a talented football recruit is, that's uncharted territory for the most part. So you have another guy, Aiden Bitters, another guy out of Florida. He's kind of he's pretty stereotypical slot receiver kind of player. That I think he's going to, I don't know if he'll get much time next year just because there's a lot of talent coming back. The receiver room is going to be very, very deep next year. So he's probably a couple years down the road, and he might be a special teams kind of guy for the first couple years, but I think you'll see him. He could turn into a very nice route runner, possession type receiver on offense. So overall, I guess I totally forgot the defensive line. Two big pickups there because you have Jamal Johnson and Ray Lima graduating, two big playmakers. So you've got some holes in the center defensive line, but they got two very, very good pieces. Willis Singleton's a high school kid, kind of in the mold of a Ray Lima type guy, where he's a run stuffer up the middle. He's not necessarily going to be an elite pass rusher. I mean, he could be, I suppose, but right away, anyways, he'll probably be a run stopper, kind of like a Ray Lima. That he could definitely get some early playing time. Kind of the prize of this class, though, is a JUCO named Latrell Bankston. He was the JUCO Defensive Player of the Year last year. He's an explosive athlete in the middle of that defensive line. Ordinarily, you don't see nose tackles pick up much recognition. You don't hear or see a lot from them usually. But this guy, he shows up. He pops on film at the nose tackle spot, and that's exactly what Iowa State can use at the middle of that, because especially in that 3 down front, you've got a lot of really talented defensive ends, and if you can have a defensive tackle that's capable of collapsing that pocket from the middle, that defensive line and that defense becomes significantly more dangerous because you don't have to commit 5 guys to rush in the quarterback. You can send 3 and still get pressure and drop and then play or drop 8 if you want, which is part of what makes Iowa State's defense interesting now. It's not quite as much of a novelty anymore because a lot of teams in the Big 12 are playing it. But it's still very, very effective when you can have good nose tackles, and Iowa State found 2 of them in this class.
There you have it on Iowa State's recruiting class with the early signing period finished and complete. Most of the guys are already signed, with February no longer as much in play as it has been, of course, historically. Levi, we appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely.